It is not every day you open your front door to find the HOA president screaming at your wife that she is moments away from being taken downtown in handcuffs. I had not even finished my morning coffee when Eleanor Hartley, self-appointed queen of our cul-de-sac, was standing on our porch in a blazer 2 sizes too tight, holding a clipboard like it was a warrant. My wife, Dana, stood there barefoot with a bag of recycling in her hand, wearing the kind of expression she saves for telemarketers who refuse to hang up. Eleanor's voice was so loud it startled the neighbor's dog into yelping. She was shouting about criminal violations of HOA Code Section 14B, which apparently related to trash bins being placed on the curb more than 3 hours before pickup. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing at how seriously she was taking her own performance. Dana, however, wasn't laughing. She wasn't scared either, which in hindsight should have been my first clue that Eleanor was picking a fight she couldn't possibly win. I leaned against the doorframe and asked if this was a warning or a full-on police matter. Eleanor turned to me with the solemnity of someone about to deliver the Gettysburg Address and informed me that she had already spoken to an officer about issuing an arrest. She nodded meaningfully toward the street, where a familiar beige sedan idled with its lights off. Sure enough, sitting in the driver's seat was her boyfriend, a part-time sheriff's deputy named Carl, who wore his sunglasses indoors and spoke exclusively in vague legal threat. I had encountered Carl before when he tried to ticket me for parking in front of my own house. He had this way of puffing his chest out when he said the word ordinance, like it was supposed to make you faint in fear. Dana's face didn't change an inch as Eleanor began listing potential charges. Apparently, according to Eleanor, Dana's trash bin placement was not just a violation of HOA rules but an obstruction of pedestrian right-of-way, willful disregard for neighborhood harmony, and my personal favorite, a misdemeanor under state law for obstruction of municipal services. Each phrase was delivered with the conviction of someone who just watched a legal drama marathon and was testing out the dialogue. I pointed out that our street didn't have sidewalks, so there was no pedestrian right-of-way to obstruct. Eleanor ignored that, probably because admitting I was correct would have thrown off her momentum. Carl remained in his car, pretending to be on the radio, which I am 90% sure was tuned to the classic rock station. By now, 2 of our neighbors had emerged from their garages to watch. Eleanor thrives on an audience, and their presence seemed to kick her into overdrive. She demanded Dana step off the property so Carl could detain her without trespassing. Dana looked at me, then back at Eleanor, and asked in a voice so even it was almost eerie, "Are you sure you want to go down this road?" Eleanor smirked like she'd just been handed a microphone at an awards show and said, "Absolutely. People need to learn there are consequences." That was when I caught the tiniest flicker of amusement in Dana's eyes. Now, you need to understand something about my wife. She is not the type to escalate a situation without cause, but she is also not the type to tolerate being pushed around. She's the kind of person who will smile and let you dig your own hole before handing you the shovel again. I decided to stand back and let this play out. Eleanor was still mid-rant when Dana set the recycling bag down, folded her arms and said, "You're claiming you've involved law enforcement in this. If that's true, I'd like to hear from the officer directly." Eleanor, sensing her moment to really make this official, waved Carl over. Carl finally emerged from the car, moving with the slow swagger of someone who wanted it to look like a movie scene. He adjusted his belt, touched the brim of his cap, and announced he was prepared to place Mrs. Miller under arrest pending further review. I was about to ask, pending review by who, when Dana interrupted, her tone calm but with an edge sharp enough to cut steel. "Before you try to lay a hand on me, deputy," she said, "I need to see your badge, and I need you to state your probable cause for the record." The crowd shifted. Even Eleanor looked a little caught off guard by the formality of the question. Carl hesitated, muttered something about complaints filed, and then made the mistake of stepping onto our property. Dana took one step forward, her voice lower now but somehow even more commanding. You've been told you have no probable cause, and you're about to commit an unlawful detainment on private property without a warrant." Carl blinked at her like she'd just spoken in another language. I recognized the shift in his posture immediately. He was starting to realize this was not going to be the easy intimidation job Eleanor had promised him. Eleanor, not picking up on the tension, barked that Dana was stalling and that Carl should just cuff her already. Dana didn't move. In fact, she reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a small leather wallet, flipping it open just enough for Carl to see something inside. His entire demeanor changed in an instant. He straightened up, took half a step back, and cleared his throat. Eleanor, confused by his retreat, demanded to know why he was hesitating. Carl muttered something about needing to double-check protocol, and backed away toward his car. Dana didn't follow. She just let the silence hang there while Eleanor sputtered. Then, with that same calm, measured tone, Dana told Eleanor she had exactly 30 seconds to leave our property before she herself would be facing charges. I swear I saw Eleanor's brain trying to compute what was happening, but the math wasn't mathing. She stammered something about misunderstandings, and just trying to maintain order, before finally storming off toward her house. Carl's car was gone before she even got to her driveway. The neighbors, sensing the show was over, shuffled back into their garages. Dana picked up the recycling bag again, tossed me a look that said, "I'll explain later," and went inside. I stood there on the porch for a moment, still processing. All I knew for certain was that Eleanor had just declared war on the wrong person, and whatever she thought she knew about Dana, she was about to learn a lot more. And me? I was already planning the popcorn supply. The next morning, I expected things to be quiet. Eleanor had gotten humiliated on our porch. Carl had backed off like a rookie who just realized he was about to get fired, and Dana seemed entirely unbothered. If it had been me in her shoes, I might have spent the morning replaying the confrontation in my head, savoring every moment. Dana, however, made pancakes, fed the cat, and started reading the news as though nothing had happened. That was my wife. No gloating, no lingering on the drama. If she held grudges, she stored them in a vault I didn't have the combination to. But I should have known Eleanor wasn't the type to retreat and regroup quietly. By noon, the first sign came in the form of an email. The subject line: Notice of Escalation, Immediate HOA Board Hearing. It was addressed to both of us, signed by Eleanor herself in her capacity as HOA president, and CC'd to something like 12 other board members. The tone was painfully formal, the kind of bureaucratic language you use when you're trying to make something sound legal but don't actually have the law on your side. According to the email, Dana's open hostility toward HOA enforcement and her obstruction of community officers had prompted an emergency hearing scheduled for the following evening. When I read it aloud, Dana didn't even look up from her coffee. "Let her schedule her meeting," she said. "I'll attend." The way she said it made me wonder if she was looking forward to it. I asked if she wanted me to come along for moral support, but she shook her head. "I think she's trying to set a trap," Dana said. "If you're there, she'll try to make it about you too. I need to keep the focus on her mistakes." That was classic Dana, always seeing 2 moves ahead. An hour later, the second sign arrived. This time it wasn't digital. I was outside trimming the hedge when a white van rolled up, no logos on the side, just a big ladder on top. 2 guys hopped out carrying clipboards and tape measures. They looked more like they worked for a cable company than the city. I asked what they were doing, and one of them said they were there for an exterior compliance inspection, per HOA request. He handed me a paper that had Eleanor's name printed at the bottom, stamped urgent. The paper listed half a dozen supposed violations: grass height exceeding regulation, fence needing repainting, roof showing visible wear, gutter angle inconsistent with HOA-approved slope. It was absurd. I keep my property in better shape than most of the neighborhood. If anything, my lawn is the one other people measure theirs against. But I knew exactly what Eleanor was doing, fishing for anything she could throw at us before the hearing. Dana stepped outside, listened for about 20 seconds, and told the inspectors they were trespassing. When they protested, she asked for their credentials and work order from the city. Of course, they didn't have any. It was all coming from Eleanor's little HOA command center. Dana informed them she'd be contacting the sheriff's department to report unauthorized inspection. They left in a hurry, muttering about, "just doing our job." I thought that might be the end of the day's drama, but Eleanor had one more move. Around 4 in the afternoon, Carl's beige sedan returned. This time, Carl wasn't in uniform, just jeans and a t-shirt, but he still wore the badge on his belt like it was jewelry. He knocked, and when I opened the door, he tried to put on his official voice. "I'm here to deliver a courtesy warning," he said, as though reading from a script. "Eleanor's filed a harassment complaint with the HOA against your wife. You might want to encourage her to apologize before things get out of hand." I could have laughed, but I remembered Dana's advice. Never give them the reaction they're fishing for. "I'll let Dana know you stopped by," I said, then closed the door before he could add anything else. Through the curtain, I saw him stand there for a few seconds, probably waiting for me to call him back out of curiosity, before finally walking away. That night, Dana finally told me the full story of what Carl had seen in her wallet the day before. I'd guessed it was some kind of ID, but I hadn't realized it was her badge. Dana was a senior officer with the county police department. She doesn't talk about work much, partly because her cases aren't dinner table stories, and partly because she prefers to keep a low profile in the neighborhood. But Carl, being part-time and low-ranking, had recognized the rank immediately, which explained why he'd retreated so fast. The next evening came faster than I expected. The HOA board meeting was held in the community center, a beige building with fluorescent lights that flickered just enough to make you wish you were anywhere else. Dana walked in wearing her usual off-duty outfit: jeans, sneakers, and a light jacket. No uniform, no badge visible, just calm confidence. I tagged along, staying in the back so she could take the floor. Eleanor was already there, seated at the head of the table like a monarch on her throne, with Carl sitting 2 chairs down. Around the table sat the board members, a mix of retirees, overzealous volunteers, and the one guy who only shows up to argue about pool hours. The rest of the chairs were filled with curious residents who had clearly heard about the porch showdown. Eleanor wasted no time. She launched into a speech about maintaining community standards and the dangerous precedent of undermining HOA authority. She painted Dana as a hostile neighbor who had disrespected a law enforcement officer and refused to comply with repeated warnings. She didn't mention that the warnings were fabricated or that Carl was acting outside his authority, of course. When she finally yielded the floor, Dana stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even change her expression. She simply began dismantling Eleanor's claims one by one, citing the HOA bylaws from memory and pointing out where Eleanor had exceeded her authority. She addressed Carl directly at one point, asking him to confirm under oath whether he had been acting in an official capacity during the porch incident. Carl shifted uncomfortably and admitted he had not. That admission cracked something in the room. A couple of board members exchanged glances, one cleared his throat, and the guy who argues about pool hours muttered something about overreach. Dana pressed on, producing her own evidence. Photos of our property in pristine condition, timestamps showing our trash bins had been placed within the allowed window, and a printed copy of state law clarifying that HOA officers are not law enforcement. Eleanor tried to interrupt, but Dana kept speaking, her tone never rising. When she finally stopped, the room was quiet. Even the board seemed unsure how to proceed. One member suggested tabling the complaint for further review. Another said there might be grounds to investigate misuse of HOA resources. Eleanor's face was a shade I'd never seen before, somewhere between rage and embarrassment. She clearly hadn't expected Dana to come armed with facts, let alone to expose Carl's bluff in front of the whole neighborhood. Carl stared at the table, avoiding eye contact with anyone. When the meeting adjourned, people lingered, chatting in low voices. A few came up to us to say they admired how calmly Dana had handled it. Eleanor left quickly, Carl trailing behind like a shadow. As we walked to the car, Dana turned to me and said, "She's not done." That was just her opening act. The certified letter sat on the kitchen counter between us like some kind of poisonous snake. I'd signed for it while Dana was in the shower, and by the time she came out, coffee in hand, I was itching to tear it open. She didn't even rush. She took a sip, set the mug down, and slit the envelope with a butter knife, sliding the papers out one by one. The letterhead was impressive. Crisp font, embossed HOA seal at the top, a paragraph of intimidating legal jargon. But as Dana read aloud, I realized the entire thing was basically a glorified tantrum dressed up in lawyer clothes. It accused Dana of misrepresentation of authority, interference with HOA enforcement procedures, and, my personal favorite, creating a climate of fear within the community. They were demanding she issue a public apology at the next board meeting, pay a $1,500 fine, and agree to a formal conduct review, conducted by a neutral arbitrator selected by the HOA. If she failed to comply, they claimed they would pursue appropriate legal remedies, including potential civil action. Dana didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. She just read it twice, folded it neatly, and set it back in the envelope. She hired a lawyer who doesn't realize this letter is about to become evidence against her, she said. I asked if we needed to call an attorney ourselves, but Dana shook her head. Not yet. First, I'm going to see how far she's willing to go when she thinks she's in control. That same afternoon, Dana made her first move. She drove to the county courthouse, parked in a visitor spot, and walked straight into the records office. I tagged along, because curiosity has always been my fatal flaw. Inside, Dana requested the HOA's corporate filings, the board's meeting minutes for the past 2 years, and a list of any registered contractors they had used for inspections or enforcement. The clerk raised an eyebrow at the scope of the request, but Dana just smiled. "It's for a community matter," she said. We spent the next hour in a corner booth flipping through binders and printed pages. I'd expected it to be boring, but it was like peeling back wallpaper and finding the wall underneath is full of cracks. For one thing, Eleanor had signed off on multiple emergency repairs that never seemed to have corresponding invoices. The board had approved community improvement projects that cost thousands but never actually happened, like a playground resurfacing that, according to the records, was completed 8 months ago but, according to anyone with eyes, still had the same cracked rubber flooring from 5 years back. Dana didn't say much as she jotted notes, but I could see the picture forming in her head. "She's been using her position for personal gain," she murmured, almost to herself. "And if I can prove she's been using HOA funds for things unrelated to the community, this letter she sent me becomes the least of her problems." The next day, the tension in the neighborhood was palpable. I don't know if word had already started spreading or if people just sensed something was brewing, but every interaction felt loaded. When I took out the trash, Mrs. Larkin from 3 houses down gave me a conspiratorial look and said, "Saw Eleanor meeting with her lawyer this morning at the cafe. She didn't look happy." By evening, a neighbor texted me a blurry photo of Eleanor and Carl sitting in Carl's sedan, clearly arguing about something. That night, Dana quietly compiled her findings into a tidy binder. She cross-referenced the financial discrepancies with the HOA bylaws and included the letter from the lawyer right up front. "This," she said, tapping the cover, "is my insurance policy." 2 mornings later, the war moved to a new front. I woke up to the sound of a loud diesel engine idling outside. A tow truck, bright yellow and obnoxiously loud, was parked in front of our driveway. The driver was standing by, clipboard in hand, waiting for authorization. I didn't even have to ask who had called them. Sure enough, Eleanor appeared moments later, waving a piece of paper and claiming the HOA had the right to impound vehicles that were abandoned or inoperable. The target, apparently, was Dana's patrol car, A personal vehicle the department had authorized her to use off-duty. It wasn't abandoned. It wasn't inoperable. It was just parked in our driveway like it always was. Dana stepped outside, phone already recording, and asked Eleanor to state her authority for the tow on camera. Eleanor waved the paper again, but the tow truck driver leaned over to Dana and admitted, "I was told it was a junker. Didn't know it was yours, ma'am." That was when Dana flipped open her badge wallet and politely informed the driver that attempting to tow a law enforcement vehicle without cause could result in criminal charges. The driver didn't need to be told twice. He unhooked the truck and drove off before Eleanor could even finish yelling at him to stay. Eleanor, realizing she'd just been filmed trying to authorize an illegal tow, stormed back to her house. Dana didn't even watch her go. She just stopped recording, looked at me and said, "She's accelerating. That means she's nervous." Later that day, the nervousness became obvious. Dana got a call from someone on the HOA board, one of the quieter members who usually just nods through meetings. In a hushed voice, he told Dana that Eleanor had been making calls to individual board members, trying to convince them to vote for her plan to censure Dana and force her off the HOA roster entirely. The problem? Dana wasn't even on the roster. It was pure theatrics. But Eleanor was so fixated on winning that she hadn't noticed her plan made no procedural sense. That night, Dana made her second move. She scheduled a meeting, not with Eleanor, but with the county fraud investigator. She brought the binder. I waited in the lobby while she sat in a glass-walled conference room for nearly an hour. When she emerged, she looked satisfied. "They're opening an inquiry," she said simply. "If Eleanor's been misusing HOA funds, they'll find out. And if Carl's been helping her skirt the law, they'll find that out too." The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. A county vehicle was parked outside the community center. 2 investigators went in with clipboards. By lunchtime, people were openly talking about the audit and speculating about whether Eleanor would keep her position. I spotted her on her porch that afternoon, phone pressed to her ear, pacing like a caged animal. Carl was nowhere to be seen. But Eleanor still had one card to play. That evening, just as the sun was setting, a pair of uniformed officers arrived at our door. Not Carl, real deputies this time. They said they'd received a complaint from the HOA about disturbances and threatening behavior toward neighbors. Dana invited them in, offered them coffee, and calmly explained the situation, showing them the letter, the video of the tow attempt, and a copy of the HOA bylaws. The deputies took notes, exchanged a look, and said something I wasn't expecting. "We're familiar with this HOA. You're not the first complaint we've had about their president." They assured us no further action would be taken against us and left with a copy of Dana's evidence. Dana closed the door and finally let herself smile. "She doesn't realize it yet," she said, "but she's just given me exactly what I needed to make this public." By Thursday morning, the air in the neighborhood felt charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm break. People weren't just giving curious glances anymore, they were openly whispering in driveways, leaning over fences, stopping each other mid-dog walk to trade the latest theories. I could practically hear the rumor mill grinding away. Some thought Eleanor would resign before Friday to avoid public humiliation. Others were convinced she'd lawyer up and come swinging harder. I knew better. Eleanor wasn't the retreating type. She would burn the entire HOA to the ground before she handed over her crown. I was sipping coffee on the porch when I saw her SUV pull out of the driveway. She drove past without even glancing at our house, though the tightness in her grip on the steering wheel gave her away. Dana, sitting beside me with her phone, didn't look up. "She's going to her lawyer," she said. "She'll come back with some grand gesture she thinks will rally her supporters." That grand gesture arrived less than 2 hours later. A mass email hit every HOA member's inbox. Subject line: "Stand together for our community." In it, Eleanor painted herself as the victim of a coordinated smear campaign led by individuals with ulterior motives. She claimed the financial discrepancies were nothing more than accounting errors and miscommunications, and that the county investigation was an overreaction instigated by false reports. The kicker? She invited everyone to Friday's meeting to show solidarity against divisive forces and protect the integrity of our leadership. I almost admired the shamelessness. Almost. Dana didn't seem fazed. She scrolled through the email, smirked at the more melodramatic phrases, and set her phone down. She's doubling down. That means she's gambling that I won't make the next move before Friday. Dana did make the next move, though not the one Eleanor expected. That afternoon, she contacted a local journalist she knew from a previous case. She explained the situation in careful, measured terms, sticking to the verifiable facts, not the drama, and offered copies of the same documents she'd given the county. The reporter didn't take much convincing. "An HOA president under county investigation?" she said over the speakerphone. "Oh yeah, that's a headline." They arranged an interview for Friday morning, just hours before the meeting. Thursday night, Carl finally reappeared. I saw him pull into Eleanor's driveway, but instead of going inside, he stood by his car, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low, rapid bursts. Every so often he'd glance toward our house. It wasn't paranoia. He was watching us. Dana noticed too. "He's either trying to figure out how to protect himself," she said, "or Eleanor's got him running some last-ditch errand." Friday morning dawned crisp and unnervingly quiet. No kids on bikes, no joggers, no one puttering in their gardens. It was as if the whole neighborhood was collectively holding its breath. Dana left early for her interview, binder in hand, while I stayed back to keep an eye on things. Around 10, a knock came at the door. I opened it to find a man in a suit I didn't recognize. He introduced himself as an attorney representing the HOA, though not Eleanor's personal lawyer, which was telling. He handed me a thick envelope and said it was a proposed settlement. Inside was an offer. If Dana agreed to retract her complaints, stop discussing HOA matters with non-members, and acknowledge Eleanor's good-faith efforts to resolve the issues, the board would waive the $1,500 fine and consider the matter closed. It was laughable. They wanted to buy her silence without admitting any wrongdoing. When Dana got home and read it, she didn't even blink. "We're not taking it," she said. "That letter proves they're panicking. I want it on record that they tried to negotiate in the middle of an investigation." The rest of the day moved in slow motion. At 4 o'clock, the local news site posted the story. HOA president under county investigation amid financial discrepancy claims. The article was straightforward, quoting Dana only as a resident who filed a formal complaint and citing the county's confirmation of an open inquiry. But it was enough. By 5, the story had been shared on the neighborhood Facebook group, complete with comment threads that read like miniature war zones. By the time we walked to the community center for the meeting, you could feel the split in the crowd. Half the residents wore expressions of grim curiosity, the other half carried the stubborn loyalty of people determined to defend their leader no matter what. Inside, the room was already packed. The folding chairs were all taken, people were standing in the back, and the low hum of conversation stopped dead when Dana and I entered. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, chin high, wearing a navy suit and a pearl necklace that looked like it had been chosen to scream authority. Carl was posted near the wall, arms crossed, glaring at us like he thought it might actually do something. The other board members looked unsettled. You could tell they had read the article. Eleanor called the meeting to order, her voice sharp and theatrical. She began with a prepared statement about recent attacks on her character and leadership, claiming they were fueled by misinformation and personal vendettas. She assured everyone that the HOA's finances were sound and that any discrepancies were being addressed internally. Then she moved to the main event, a motion to censure Dana for behavior unbecoming of a community member. The moment Eleanor said the words, Dana stood. She didn't wait to be invited to speak. "Before any motion can be considered," she said evenly, I need to clarify a few points for the record. She reached into her bag and placed a thick stack of papers on the table, copies of the HOA's own financial records, marked with the suspicious entries. She slid one copy toward each board member. I've highlighted payments authorized by the president that have no corresponding invoices, Dana said. Some of these are for projects that never took place. Others are for amounts that exceed the cost of similar work in neighboring communities by more than 50%. All of these payments came from HOA funds, our dues. The room was silent except for the soft shuffle of paper as board members flipped pages. Eleanor's expression didn't crack, but her knuckles whitened on the edge of the table. Dana continued, her voice steady, almost conversational. She explained the county's involvement, the attempted illegal tow, and the settlement letter we'd received just that morning. She didn't raise her voice once. She didn't have to. When she finished, one of the board members, a soft-spoken man named Howard, cleared his throat. "Madam President," he said slowly, "these are serious allegations. I move that we table the censure motion and instead vote on whether to suspend the president pending the outcome of the county investigation." The reaction was immediate. Gasps, murmurs, the scrape of a chair leg. Eleanor tried to shut it down, insisting the motion was out of order, but another board member seconded it before she could finish. And then, right there in front of the entire neighborhood, the vote was called. 4 in favor of suspension. 2 against. 1 abstained. Eleanor was out, at least temporarily. The look on her face was something between disbelief and fury. Carl started to step forward, but Dana's gaze cut to him like a warning shot, and he stayed where he was. I stared at the note in my hand longer than I should have. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a handwriting expert to guess where it came from. The paper smelled faintly of Eleanor's perfume, the kind of sharp, flowery scent that somehow lingered in the air like a warning. Dana took it from me, gave it one glance, and folded it neatly. She didn't throw it away. She didn't even look unsettled. She just set it on the counter as though it were a receipt we might need later. "She's getting sloppy," Dana said, pouring herself a glass of water. "Anonymous threats are for people who don't want to leave fingerprints. Eleanor's fingerprints are all over this." That night, Dana didn't talk about the note again, but I could tell she was turning it over in her mind. She has this way of going completely still when she's planning something. She'll be sitting there, eyes on whatever book she's pretending to read, but I can almost hear the mental gears clicking into place. I've learned not to interrupt that process. By Saturday morning, her plan was in motion. She started with a quiet phone call to the county investigator handling the HOA case, letting them know about the note. Then she contacted the reporter from Friday's interview. I could only hear Dana's side of the conversation, but her tone was calm, deliberate, and faintly amused. She was feeding the reporter just enough to keep the story alive, without tipping Eleanor off to what was coming. Midday, the first ripple hit the neighborhood. The local news ran a follow-up. Suspended HOA president faces new allegations of retaliation. The article didn't print the note verbatim, but it made it clear that a suspended leader was accused of sending an anonymous threat to the complainant. They even used the phrase, "pattern of intimidation." It was subtle, but devastating. Around 3, Carl made his move. I was in the garage when his sedan pulled into our driveway without so much as a honk. He got out, wearing civilian clothes but still with that posture he thought made him look like a man of authority. Without asking, he walked up to me. "You need to tell your wife to back off," he said. His voice was low, but the words were tight with anger. "She's ruining Eleanor's reputation. You don't come back from this kind of thing." I leaned on the workbench and looked at him for a beat. "She's not ruining Eleanor's reputation," I said. "Eleanor's doing that herself. Dana's just holding up the mirror." He took a step closer, like proximity might intimidate me. "There are people in this neighborhood who don't want this mess getting bigger. You think you're safe because your wife's a cop? That protection doesn't last forever." I should have been angry, but I wasn't. I was curious. I wanted to see how far Carl would go. Before I could answer, Dana's voice came from behind him. "You're right, Carl," she said evenly. "Protection doesn't last forever. But right now, I'm still very much an officer with the authority to arrest anyone making threats on private property. Do you want me to repeat what you just said into my body cam, or will you be leaving now?" Carl froze, shoulders stiff, then walked back to his car without another word. I watched him go, knowing the real damage wasn't from the confrontation, it was from the fact that he now understood Dana had him recorded, even if she didn't. By Sunday, the story had taken on a life of its own. Someone, likely a board member who'd had enough, leaked a copy of the HOA's full financial ledger to the neighborhood Facebook group. The comments were relentless. People who'd always defended Eleanor were suddenly noticing that their dues had paid for emergency landscaping at a property suspiciously similar to Eleanor's vacation cabin. Someone else pointed out that the playground project that never happened had been budgeted 3 times over. Monday morning brought the kind of escalation that told me we were in the final act. A plain white sedan with government plates pulled up to Eleanor's house. 2 county investigators went inside. They stayed for nearly 3 hours. By the time they left, Eleanor's blinds were drawn, her SUV was gone, and Carl's sedan was parked down the block, as if he didn't want to be seen there. That evening, the HOA board sent out an official notice. An emergency election would be held to replace the suspended president. It was worded like they'd reached the decision unanimously, though I suspected it had taken some arm twisting. Nominations would be taken immediately, and a vote would be held within the week. This was the moment Dana had been waiting for. She didn't want the presidency. She had no interest in running bake sales and deciding the color of mailboxes, but she knew exactly who should take the seat. Her choice was Howard, the same board member who'd made the motion to suspend Eleanor. He was quiet, practical, and entirely uninterested in using the HOA for personal power. If he won, Eleanor's ability to influence the board would evaporate. Tuesday, Dana met with Howard at the coffee shop down the road. They spoke for an hour. By the time they left, Howard looked a little stunned but also resolute. That night, he posted his candidacy announcement on the neighborhood forum, framing it as a chance for a new chapter in HOA leadership. The comments were overwhelmingly positive. Wednesday morning, Eleanor tried one last desperate play. She sent a mass text to her dwindling supporters, claiming that if Howard was elected, the neighborhood will be overrun with lax enforcement, declining property values, and outsider influence. She didn't name Dana, but the implication was clear enough. Unfortunately for her, most people had already stopped listening. By Thursday, the vote was held. The community center was crowded again, but this time the mood was different, less tense, more anticipatory. The ballots were counted in front of everyone. Howard won by a landslide. Eleanor didn't even stay for the tally. She walked out midway through, head high, but with no one following her. Carl was absent entirely. That night, for the first time in weeks, the neighborhood felt calm. No strange cars idling outside our house, no whisper campaigns, no sudden inspections. Dana and I sat on the porch, watching the streetlights flicker on. I asked her if she thought Eleanor was finished. "She's finished here," Dana said. "She'll find somewhere else to start over. People like her always do. But she won't try me again." And just when I thought the whole saga was over, the final twist landed in our lap. Friday morning, a county press release announced that the investigation had concluded. Eleanor was facing charges for misappropriation of funds, falsifying records, and attempted fraud. Carl's name was in there too, charged with aiding and abetting in at least 2 instances where HOA rules were enforced under false pretenses. The release didn't mention Dana by name, but everyone in the neighborhood knew who'd started the dominoes falling. By evening, 3 different neighbors had dropped by with bottles of wine, and someone left a thank you card in our mailbox signed by most of the street. We didn't throw a victory party. That's not Dana's style. But when we sat down that night, wine glasses in hand, she finally let herself relax. She didn't brag. She didn't gloat. She just said, "The best revenge is making sure they can't hurt anyone else."